I'm going to start out with an admission that sometimes I can say things that seem batshit crazy, conspiracy theory kind of stuff. But typically when I say it, I have a good reason for saying it. A few days ago, for example, I did a video where I demonstrated that the mask mandate here in Texas did no good to fight the Chinese virus. It didn't slow it down one bit. And that seems crazy. But the very next day, this article came out from The Hill. Minnesota infectious disease expert calls for a second national lockdown. Do not listen to him. That's terrible advice. But here's my quote. The degree to which masking will drop transmission has been unfortunately overstated substantially, by a number of people, he said, citing recent spikes in Hong Kong where mask usage is far more widespread. I would say universal. Obviously, there's more data than just Hong Kong, One swallow does not a summer make. So now I've said over and over again, I make a lot of crazy assertions in my videos. I back everything up and I'm happy to walk away from anything, but I must say, usually when I have to walk something back, it's because I wasn't crazy enough. I got a video coming on Minoan religion and the Iliad. It's going to be very interesting. This is probably the last video I'm going to make about the Chinese virus and George Floyd and the job that I was fired on. I've gotten kind of tired of talking about it because there's just too much fraud in this. Now, not the virus itself. It's deadly. Don't make any mistake. But I'm just going to pack this away into a single playlist for future reference. I used to track the numbers very closely, the infection rates and the deaths. And I accept that this is a deadly virus, but I have no idea how deadly it is, and I know that those numbers cannot be trusted. For example, you break your leg, you go to the hospital, test positive for COVID, you die from some infection or whatever, they're going to label you as dead from COVID. Even better, we clearly have outright fraud in New York and New Jersey. Either they're lying about the number of people who died from that virus, big time, or they killed a lot of patients. And now we have the same thing going on in South Texas, in the territories dominated by the Hispanics near the Mexican border. The infection rates down there are off the Richter. They're crazy. Are they sending sick people in from Mexico? Are they dosing people on purpose with this virus? I have no idea what's going on here. Then we have this crazy African doctor down in Houston saying she has a cure. Well, the problem is that there's a Jewish doctor in Long Island who told Rudy Giuliani the same thing about the same treatment months ago. So everybody's calling her a fraud and they're circulating videos making her look crazy. By the way, she's right about where demons come from. She has a ministry. She's Christian. She's right about where demons come from. We're actually going to talk about that. But they're saying that she's crazy and that she's a fraud. Well, all you have to do is answer the question, is she a liar? She makes claims about the treatment of her patient or what the results. That Jewish doctor in Long Island from months ago made the same claims. Are they telling the truth or not? It's easy to answer that question. Now, this final video is really going to be a meditation, a biblical meditation. On who this virus is hitting the hardest, and most importantly, who this virus is sparing relatively. Everybody's getting hit. But one group of people seems to be fairly spared from this virus. White people. We're handling it pretty well. And for something like this, really, the only numbers I pay attention to are the numbers for white people. Not because I don't like anybody else. Because if they can manage it, then it can be managed. And if anybody else isn't managing it, you need to figure out what's going on here. I can work with you. But this nonsense going around where you blame white people for all your problems, including your corona deaths, no. I'm done with that. Not only are your deaths high, but your infection rates are crazy. Dallas County is 3 times higher than Collin County, where I'm at right now. Now, it's hitting everybody harder than white people, and a lot harder, including Asians. So what's going on here? What's going on here is that none of these people have respect for boundaries, to a greater or lesser extent. All of them. There's a chronic and massive problem in the African American community, which I can personally bear witness to. I've lived and worked in that community off and on for decades, ever since I was a little boy. We have Hispanics who've been breaking into our country for decades. That's why they filled up those counties down in South Texas, making themselves at home, quite often at our expense. And then we have the Asians, those perfect, fantastic model immigrants, superior to us in every way. I'm sure we all agree. That's what I've been told for 40 years. Yet when you adjust for age, which you need to do for this virus, because it gets hit harder, older people get harder, we're doing much better than them. Here in Texas, we're doing marginally a lot better than them, head and shoulders above them, but everybody else, it's a big gap. So aren't they model? Aren't they so perfect? Aren't they so smart? Oh, look at all those valedictorians they have. Look at all those people they have in Ivy League. Yeah, they have their little study groups. They've been going on for decades. We all know about them. They're just rackets, like the mob. We have racketeering laws. We need to go after them. They're padding their grades. They're padding their SAT scores. Everybody knows that. They've been afraid to say anything about it for decades. Didn't want to be called racist, God forbid. But we also told the Chinese it was okay to steal our intellectual property when we made trade agreements with them. That's certainly the way the Chinese took it. I think it was under Jimmy Carter back in the late 70s. They said, we want access to your intellectual property. We said, yes, sir. And we gave it to them. So now we have ethnic Chinese in their country. A lot of them we busted right before the Chinese virus broke into the country, which was an act of race war terrorism, by the way. Catching a bunch of them stealing from us. Well, why shouldn't they? Everybody says Donald Trump is a racist, or I'm a racist. We all say the same thing. Why shouldn't the Mexicans break in? We said it was okay. Why shouldn't the Chinese steal from us? They said it was okay. But the problem is that when you violate other people's boundaries, when you don't respect boundaries, you hurt yourself. And this is what's happening here. When you don't respect boundary, you have to pay a toll to chaos. Your bill comes due. The bill is due. And in chaos, that creature is Leviathan. In the Enuma Elish of Babylon, she is Tiamat. We also have Python or Typhon among the Greeks. Python is Apollo fought Python and Zeus fought Typhon. The T-F switch, yeah, that's part of it's an Indo-European thing. So really it's the same creature, chaos. He's also called Leton among the Syrians from the Baal Cycle, which is related to, sounds like Leviathan because it's related. The language they spoke at the city of Ebla, from which we get the Baal Cycle. We've recovered that cycle. They spoke a language similar to Hebrew, directly related to it. These people have all picked a fight with Leviathan, and he ain't one to play games with that kind of nonsense. Okay, so let's go in our Bible. We'll start with Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The first boundary, the boundary of boundaries, the boundary on which all other boundaries depend. If you don't have that boundary, what happens? What consequences from violating that boundary? Dire. You'll see. It's in the Bible. The earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, the face of the Tiam. It's very important. That language is, the Bible is reacting to the Enuma Elish of Babylon. While a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Wind, it's ruach, can also mean spirit or breath. Swept over, not quite right. It's more like hovered over the waters, hovered over the Tiam. Tiam is Tiamat, related to Tiamat. Now in the Enuma Elish, Marduk, the chief god of the Babylonians, Tiamat has her maw, he's fighting Tiamat. She has her mouth open to swallow him, and he blows a wind into her mouth, and now she can't shut her mouth. And her belly blows out like a balloon, and he pops the balloon. Then he splits her in half like a flat fish, a clam, creates from her heaven and earth above and earth below. The first boundary. Everybody agrees it's the first boundary. Is the Tiam destroyed in Genesis? No. Boundaries are erected on top of Tiam. Tiam is still there. She, he, it doesn't matter. It's still there. And this is how we learn about good, robust psychological programs, or art, or creation. You descend into the chaos, and then you pop back out again. A new order pops back out. And in that order are boundaries upon that boundary. And when you just go into an order like the United States of America and crash the boundaries, this is what you get. You end up making yourself sick. The boundaries must be respected. This is how chaos is. The Prima Materia, as the alchemists would call it, the prime material. Proto-matter, as Aristotle would call it. Everything is built out of this. It's a vibrating field. That's chaos. The chaos is going to erupt at the end of time. Chaos, Leviathan. You'll see that Satan is a trinity. Satan the Father is the dragon who's thrown out of heaven in Revelation. We're going to start with Genesis, but we'll end in Revelation. Satan the Son will be Leviathan arising out of the sea. You'll see that it is indeed the counterpart to Jesus. And Satan the Holy Spirit is there too, calling down fire from heaven. We're not going to read all that, but we're going to read from chapter 13 of Revelation. Where does fire come down from heaven? Pentecost, the descent of the Holy Spirit. So confirming my interpretation. So now we move on to Genesis chapter 6. The boundary between heaven and earth is violated. The consequences are very dire. This is where the demons come from. This is what she talks about. When people began to multiply on the face of the ground, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that they were fair. Bene ha-Elohim. These are gods, for lack of a better word. Call them deities, if you will. Too complicated to get into here, but the gods are real, but they're definitely subservient to God Most High, Elyon. The sons of God saw that they were fair, and they took wives for themselves of all that they chose. Then Yahweh said, My spirit shall not abide in mortals forever, for they are flesh. Their days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim, the mighty ones, were on the earth in those days and also afterward. When the sons of God went in to the daughters of humans who bore children to them. These were the heroes that were of old, warriors of renown. The Nephilim are born of the sons of God mating with the daughters of men. The Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. And Yahweh was sorry that he had made humankind on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So Yahweh said, I will blot out from the earth the human beings I've created, people together with animals and creeping things and birds of the air, for I'm sorry that I've made them. Consequences are dire for violating those boundaries. Mostly in the book of Enoch that explains this. It's not in our Bible, but for the Ethiopian Christians it is in theirs. Where else can you think this boundary might have been violated? Genesis chapter 19. The two angels came to Sodom in the evening. It's all about homosexuality, right? And Lot was sitting at the gateway of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. He said, Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you can rise early and go on your way. They said, No, we will spend the night in the square. But he urged them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered the house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house. Also, they were all homosexuals. Is that your story? Are you sticking to it? They called to Lot, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may know them. Lot went out to the door to the men and shut the door after him and says, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Look, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. Oh, Lot, you're crazy. These are homosexuals. What are you offering your daughters to gay men for? Unless it's about something other than homosexuality. It's about rape. Just as the angels came down, well, the book of Enoch says they tricked the women, but I don't think they did. Came down and had sex with women. These men are trying to have sex with angels, also divine beings, violating the boundaries between heaven and earth. We're going to skip ahead to the book of Job. I think chapter 38. 38. Then Yahweh answered Job out of the whirlwind, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determines its measurements? Surely you know where it began and where it ended, where its boundaries are. Seems to be kind of important, don't you think? Boundaries? Who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang and all the heavenly beings shouted for joy? Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out of the womb? When I made the cloud its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed bounds to it, and set bars and doors, and said, thus far shall you come, and no farther. This is our border, no farther, unless you get permission. And here shall your proud waves be stopped. Where were you at that time? And following up on that, all sorts of different questions that he asked, and all of a sudden, for some mysterious reason, Yahweh starts talking about, can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook? Or press down its tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in its nose or pierce its jaw with a hook? Will it make many supplications to you? Will it speak soft words to you? Will it make a covenant with you to be taken as your servant forever? So he's still here. Will you play with it as with a bird? Or will you put it on a leash for your girls? God has put Leviathan on a leash for us. Will traders bargain over it? Will they divide it up among the merchants? Can you fill its skin with harpoons or its head with fishing spears? Lay hands on it. Think of the battle. You'll not do that again. Any hope of capturing it will be disappointed. Were not even the gods overwhelmed at the sight of it? We talked about the Enuma Elish. We're going to talk about the Baal Cycle because the Bible's also picking up on that. No one is so fierce as to dare to stir it up. Question: who can stand before it? Who can confront it and be safe? Under the whole heaven, who? Who can stand up to this Leviathan? That's coming back. The book of Daniel, chapter 7. A lot of people say they're confused about what's going on here. No. This is in the Baal Cycle. Who's this son of man? He's a mystery. Well, he's riding clouds of heaven, right? Well, then he's the counterpart to Baal. He's a god. He's not an angel. It's Jesus. But he's a son of man. He's a man. Yeah, Jesus is a man. So in the Baal cycle, you have Asherah and her 7 sons, or 70 sons, the 70 sons of El. You have all these gods, and Yam the sea has come up to challenge. Who shall fight Yam? Y-A-M-M. Later called Leviathan. And Baal steps forth. Yam is the counterpart of Baal. Leviathan is the counterpart of Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God, the Son of Man. Here we go. I, Daniel, saw in my vision by night the 4 winds of heaven stirring up the great sea. And 4 great beasts came out of the sea, different from one another. These are all incarnations of the same beast. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I watched, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a human being. And a human mind was given to it. Another beast appeared, a second one that looked like a bear. So they don't go into details on the Baal cycle, at least what survived, on who the different beasts are, but they're different creatures. It was raised up on one side, had 3 tusks in its mouth among its teeth, and were told, arise, devour many bodies. After this, as I watched, another appeared like a leopard. The beast had 4 wings of a bird on its back, and 4 heads, and dominion was given unto it. After this I saw in the visions by night a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth and was devouring, breaking in pieces and stamping what was left with its feet. It was different from all the other beasts which had preceded it. It had 10 horns. I was considering the horns when one horn appeared, a little one, coming out up among them to make room for it. 3 of the earlier horns were plucked up by the roots. There were eyes like human beings from this horn, and its mouth speaking arrogantly. Yam speaks arrogantly. challenges El and the gods. As I watched, thrones were set in place, and an ancient one took his throne, Ancient of Days. This is Elyon, God Most High. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair on his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, and its wheels were burning fire, so it's a chariot throne. A stream of fire issued and flowed out from the presence. That's the Holy Spirit. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood attending him. The court was in judgment, and the books were opened. You see this court in the Baal Cycle. It's kind of like comic books. You have Superman and Wonder Woman and DC Comics, but Marvel has Hyperion and Power Princess. Okay. And they're sort of commenting on each other's characters. And DC's done the same thing with some Marvel characters. They have their version of the Avengers, for example. Usually they don't have good things to say about each other's. So they sat in judgment, the books were opened. I watched them because the noise of the arrogant words that the horn was speaking, and as I watched, the beast was put to death, its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. As I watched the night visions, I saw one like the Son of Man. It says human being. They're starting to translate it as human being. It's a Son of Man. It's a specific title. It is a specific language that's used for a reason, and not just in Hebrew, also with the Hittites and the Hurrians. Saw one like a human being, the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. Divine beings come with the clouds of heaven. The counterpart to this Son of Man is Baal. And he came to the Ancient One, the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. To him was given dominion and glory and kingship, to all peoples, nations, and languages that serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not pass away, and his kingship is one that shall never be destroyed. So when Jesus says, "You'll see me coming from the clouds of heaven," and the priest tore his robe, this is blasphemy, he's because he claimed to be God. And at the time of Jesus, not now, they deny it, the rabbis deny it now, but at the time of Jesus, it's understood that this is God. But you see in Exodus 33, Moses talks to Yahweh face to face. He's coming down in a cloud, it's like a friend. And then Yahweh says, "You can't see my face. I want to see your glory." And Yahweh says, "You can't see my face." So he's hidden in the cleft of a rock. Yahweh comes to him, and he hides his face, and then his face is unhidden, and he could see the back of Yahweh walk away from him. But Yahweh is standing right next to him. How does he descend? He descends in a cloud. This Yahweh he's seeing face to face. No one knows the Son but the Father, and those to whom the Son... Nobody knows the Father but the Son, or the Son of the Father. I and the Father are one, an agent of the Father. This is 100%. Moses would understand Christianity completely. He would understand the Trinity. He would not be confused by it. Now, what we saw Jesus coming, this is when Jesus ascends to heaven, he takes his throne. So what we see in Daniel is what happened to Jesus. Book of Revelation, chapter 13. I used to call it Revelations. It's Revelation. Chapter 12. A great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. This is the church, Virgin Mary. Then we have a dragon expelled from heaven. That's Satan the Father. Chapter 13, Satan the Son. Then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 diadems, and on its heads were blasphemous names. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. Okay? So it can't even decide on what it wants to be. No respect for boundaries. And the dragon gave its power and his throne, and the dragon gave it his power and his throne and his great authority, just as Jesus gets his authority from the Father. One of the heads seemed to have received a death blow, but its mortal wound had been healed. What a miracle! A resurrection, a false resurrection. In amazement, the whole earth followed the beast. They worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it? Who under all of heaven, who?" This is right out of Job. When you fight boundaries, when you violate boundaries, you stand against the Lord Jesus Christ himself. You stand against the Ancient of Days. You stand against God Most High. and he does not punish you. Consequences follow. So think about that. It's not about race, how you're Mexicans or you're black or you're chinks, you're Asians. Chink, chink, chink. It's not about that. You make the choice if you're going to respect boundaries or not. Will you obey God or not? You stand against God. God made the world in good order. You stand against the order, consequences follow. Sometimes quite dire.